Friendly old iced coffee, mate.
Yep, fall to me. It's too hot to have a regular coffee. I've got a couple of graphics of the conference championships games, so go through them briefly at the start.
Oh, yeah. Forgot about them.
A long time ago.
Yeah.
Jono, stop digging. Jono! Dogs have decided that it'd be fun to dig a hole in the yard.
The snake will get in there.
Gimps. Alrighty, let's do this. Welcome, guys, to the Tripod, and today a very special one. It'll be our last NFL pod of the season. It is the Super Bowl preview, and it's the Super Bowl we all deserve. The 49ers against the Chiefs down in Miami. It's going to be a bit of a longer one than usual today. First of all, we'll go through a couple of the two conference championship games just to refresh ourselves because they were 2 weeks ago, and then we'll do a full deep dive into the game. We've got 9 best bets or 6 best bets and 3 kind of prop bets to give out today on the pod. Jacob, how are you, mate?
Fantastic, mate. I cannot wait. As you say, we've got both number 1 seeds from each conference meeting in the Super Bowl. When you say a longer pod, I mean, we're going to deep dive like never before, but it's only one game, so probably
longer
we don't
for
know
one
exactly.
Game.
We're trying to keep it sharp.
Game.
And there's plenty of content out there, plenty of people talking about the game. But you guys know, if you follow the Tripod, we differentiate ourselves because we try and come at it from an angle of what's not being considered or what's, what factors is actually going to lead you to finding value. We're not just going to sit here and say Pat Mahomes is good, but we will get to that. But we'll tell you how good. We've got a number of best bets we're going to share with you and why.
Indeed, mate. And should we just jump right into it, starting with the conference championship games from last week, or did you want to add anything else before we...
No, we can talk about the conference championship games. So,
it was a while back.
If I recall,
2 weeks ago.
Yes, and we had 4 best bets. Have you got the graphic? The first of the 2 games.
I do not, but I know that we only had bets on the Chiefs.
I remember the bets, but you've got the headings of the games and the scores.
Yep. Chiefs Titans.
Yes. So the first game was Chiefs Titans, which we had 4 best bets. We swept 4-0 on that one. We did think that the Titans would run out of steam to an extent after a really great, finish to the season by them. Once again, it was interesting. The Chiefs did fall behind double digits, only by 10. I think they were down 10-0 and also 17-7.
Correct.
At points in this game. You were never too worried. I mean, the week before we've seen them come back from 24-0. And certainly once they did get their noses in front, you didn't really have any doubt that they were just too good. Playing at Arrowhead, as I said, the Titans had to pour out a lot of big performances on the road. Ultimately, the Chiefs showed they were far too good.
And it was the perfect start for the Titans. I mean, the storyline for them is, get up, get a lead early, and let Derrick Henry do his thing. And that's what they did. Like you said, 10-0, 17-7, they were up. And then you kind of are a little bit worried, all right, now, can the Chiefs' run defense stop him? But then the Chiefs get that TD, 4 minutes left in the half, and they're only down 3 at that point. And after that, it just looked like Pat Mahomes was fucking unstoppable. And
speaking of Mahomes, actually, the key moment in that game is not the TD that cuts it to 3 with 4 minutes to go, but it's that final drive before the first half ends where you're wanting to get into field goal range and you're wanting to kick a field goal there. And he does more than that. He, beats the pass rush, gets to the sideline. The majority of times the QB is going to step out of bounds, stop the clock.
Correct.
He gets around, he gets the edge and turns it back in field and shows that he was, I think, a dual sport athlete. He is very athletic, Pat Mahomes. He's more than just a amazing arm, which is a magician and also a cannon arm, but he can make plays with his legs, which is also going to be a factor in the Super Bowl. Getting a touchdown there with 15 seconds left in the half was the backbreaker. You knew it was going to be his Chiefs day after that.
Yeah, definitely. Absolutely ridiculous 30-yard scramble for the TD. And like you said, didn't go out of bounds, just fucking cut back inside, took 3 solid hits and still made it to the end zone. Next up, we had the 49ers beating the Packers 37-20. the final scoreline probably flatters the Packers in some way, only losing by 17. They were down 27-0. And the 49ers were always in control of that one, most at 220 yards, setting all sorts of records. He was just doing whatever he wanted to that Packers defense. Pretty disappointing showing by the Packers, but it just kind of shows and reaffirms what we said, Jacob, that the 49ers, the Chiefs, and the Ravens, although the Ravens lost, were on a different level to these kind of second-tier teams, and Aaron Rodgers couldn't really get anything going. He looked lost out there, I thought. He just, after they dug themselves a tiny hole, it never looked like they were going to come back, the Packers team, and the 49ers just too good. And once they get a lead on you, you saw what they did. They just controlled the entire game.
Yeah, and I have to give credit to a team that won, I think, 2 playoff games, won them both by about 17 points to get to the Super Bowl. You can't take much away from San Fran, but I do have a lot of criticism of the way Green Bay played. Absolutely no urgency. They're looking deflated on the sideline. They're rolling their eyes and, oh, here we go when they're down 10. You got to play with your hair on fire. You are trying to play to make the Super Bowl. You have Aaron Rodgers. He's only played in 1 Super Bowl in his career. You get to a conference championship game. Where's the fight? And
I'll tell you what else. We were watching the game together a couple of weeks back, and we were saying the Packers are down like 21 points. What are they doing rolling the fucking play clock down to less than 5 every single play? You're down massively. You need to speed things up, and they didn't.
Yeah, statistically, you want more plays, more time in the game, but it's also just a matter of showing urgency, showing character that you actually want to get back in the game. And it was very disappointing by the Packers. And you just talk about the Titans, I said they ran out of puff. They were on the road every game. They had to win must-win games to get into the playoffs. The Packers got a playoff bye and played at home the week before. Yep. They had no excuses.
Absolutely
that was very disappointing. San Francisco, as you say, completely in control of that game. Very impressive. One thing I will say, we're really looking forward to the Super Bowl on Monday, and I think it's going to be a cracker. But there have been 10 playoff games so far, and 8 have been awesome. And the 2 that weren't very exciting were the 2 San Francisco games. But it's not their fault. They did everything they needed to do and nothing more. And that includes barely even, revving the engine on Jimmy G. And that's obviously going to be a massive factor. What is he capable of? Because I'm sure you agree with me, he's going to need to do a lot more on Monday, Australian time, than what he had to do in those previous 2 wins combined.
Oh, and 100% you would assume he's going to have to do more than he did against Green Bay. Let's move on to the odds for the Super Bowl. We've got the line pretty much consensus now, sitting at the Chiefs as 1.5-point favourites over the 49ers. 54 points is the total. Maybe we'll start off, Jacob, with what moves there's been in the market and what line you saw, or is widely accepted as the opening line, and what it's done since then.
Well, in terms of the market, I think I said to you, it's pretty much consensus. Most people will say the Chiefs are a slightly higher rated team than the 49ers. A lot of people had the Chiefs and the Ravens being the best 2 teams in the NFL, happened to be on the same side of same conference. And in the end, the Ravens got upset. And obviously, just because you're the better team doesn't mean you always win. And that's why we should rejoice that we do have 2 great teams meeting, because sometimes you get an upset. It's not always
that way.
It doesn't break that way. You look at some other American sports, baseball, basketball, you play a best of 7. NFL is 1 game. Yep. Anything can happen. And we're not sitting here saying 100% we can even tell you who's going to win the Super Bowl, but we will get to the fact that we do both agree one side is value and we do both have a pick.
Indeed.
So the line opened about 1.5, and I really haven't seen too much movement. And the way I see it is that the public is more so going to be inclined to be on the Chiefs. They're the more fun team to bet on. People like the flashier side. Who doesn't love Pat Mahomes? You talk about there's so much negativity online and people, hate this guy and hate that guy. Pat Mahomes is one of those rare, almost universally loved players. I don't know anyone who I can take seriously who says they don't like the guy. Phenomenal talent and a real great character from everything that you see as well. And the Niners are like this old school team that are going to have plenty of supporters too, because if you've been betting on the Niners, you've won plenty more than you lost. Let's not forget, coming into the season, the Niners were expected to win about 8.5 games. So they've well exceeded expectations. The defense is fierce. They play an old school running, smash mouth football style. I think that the Sharps may actually be waiting for the public to push this line beyond 1.5, 2. Does it get to 2.5 anywhere? I don't think it'll get to 3, but I actually think the Sharps will be coming in on game day and taking the 49ers. I think they know that physical offensive and defensive lines often win over the flashy quarterback. In fact, I have a stat that in the last 9 Super Bowls, the team with the worst QB, and that's based on just their stats for that season, won the Super Bowl. So, I mean, last year you're going to say Tom Brady beat Goff. That's not true. But actually Goff had a better season than Tom Brady. And the last time it didn't happen was when I think Drew Brees beat Peyton Manning in the Super Bowl. And it's arguable who's the better QB. This is 10 years ago anyway. So you can't simply break down a matchup by saying who has the best QB. There's a lot more to it than that, but we'll get to that. Oh, sorry, I should also say the total, that opened 51.5 and was instantly smashed up as high as 55. I think most places now it's sitting 54.5. And we agree with that move. We wish we would have got the 51.5, we can say.
Yeah, definitely. It's funny, we looked straight after the game. I think Chiefs did open 1.5 point favourites. We have heard some things coming out of the US where the game opened pick, went to Chiefs -2.5, and then kind of settled back down at Chiefs -1.5. So obviously some people were taking the Chiefs at pick'em, and then on the flip side, maybe some people buying back, but also just, people liking the 2.5 on the 49ers. As you mentioned, the total has crept up. We do agree with that move. I don't think that as much public will be on the Chiefs as we think. I saw something today that said, 56% of the tickets were on the Chiefs and 56% of the cash is on the Chiefs. So from that, you can't really say that they're necessarily the more public team or not. I think they might be a bit more favoured with the younger punters that like, flashy style, and some of the older punters that are used to saying, all right, smash mouth teams win the Super Bowl and running games.
Defense wins championships.
And run game might be a bit popular with the older punters. But let's deep dive into the actual the X's and O's, Jacob. First up, we'll start with the 49ers offense against the Chiefs defense. And look, for a Super Bowl, it's a great narrative, isn't it? It's two of the most clashing styles you can possibly have. You've got on the 49ers side, obviously, like you said, good O-line, smash mouth, run the ball. I mean, Jimmy G only threw the ball, 6 times? A couple of weeks.
Well, 6 completions,
maybe it was a couple of weeks ago. So they're relying heavily on the run game as they have all season. And the Chiefs defense this season has been one of the lower tier rush defenses. So it'll be interesting to see if they can contain this 49ers rush offense. They did a decent job against Derrick Henry last week. And the thing is, like we sort of mentioned with the Ravens, the 49ers are kind of the same. They want to jump out to an early lead, which they have a number of times this season, and then they can just run the ball down your throat. So it'll be interesting to see what the Chiefs do in order to combat that 49ers rush offense. I think they did a good job on Derrick Henry last week, but I think the best thing the Chiefs can do is actually have a lead in the first half, and then it kind of takes away the ability for the 49ers to just run it down their throat consistently.
For sure, both teams want to play with the lead, but you're right, because this Niners identity is run the ball, and then they got on the defensive side, a pass rush that gets after it, that if you are predictable and they know you need to throw, they can make plays defensively. But if we look at their offense, number one question to me, how good is Jimmy G? Because we've alluded to it. They didn't need him to do much, at all. First half of the playoff game against the Vikings, I think they might have been up about 10 or 7, but he throws an interception right before halftime, and the Vikings get a score and pull it close. And since then, Mike Shanahan's just taken the keys away from him. Sorry, not Mike Shanahan, Kyle.
Yes.
Mike's his old man who's won a couple of Super Bowls as well, which is interesting.
Well, because they haven't needed to. I mean, and it's a funny one. If I'll just jump in, but everyone kind of says yes, they want to take the keys away from Jimmy G, and to be honest, they probably do. And they haven't needed to give him the keys to drive the bus. They haven't been down double digits in many games this season, so they haven't really had to unleash him. But the 49ers all throughout, the lead up to the Super Bowl, every single 49ers player is kind of, scripting that narrative, saying to the media, look, no one believes in Jimmy G, but we do. We just, we haven't had to unleash him yet, but you guys will see on Super Bowl day that we have our full trust in Jimmy G. And to be honest, like you said, Jacob, they can say that all they like, but he hasn't shown me enough this season. Granted, he hasn't have to, but for me to be able to trust him to bring them back if they're down late in the game.
Well, you definitely would agree. We're talking about Niners offense versus the Chiefs defense, and we'll get to the flip side of the matchup. But the offense has the edge both times, no matter who's on the field. I think it's advantage to the offense because the Niners are they are a running team, which is old school, but they are dynamic. They got a lot of movement. They got a lot of misdirection, and they block well. Obviously, great O-line, but also George Kittle is a phenomenal blocking tight end. And is it Jusic? The fullback, Juszczyk, right?
I think it's pronounced with a Y. Anyway,
Juszczyk, who's a great blocking fullback who missed part of the season. So they run the ball really well. But back to Jimmy G. Now, if we agree that both offenses have the advantage, and we do think it's going to be quite a high-scoring game, so you have to ask the question: can Jimmy G win a high-scoring game? Now, I can at least point to a couple of games earlier this season where he did just that. I mean, they went to New Orleans, they fell behind double digits. They came back and won that game 48-46.
Yep.
And the New Orleans Saints defense is no joke, probably better on paper than the Chiefs defense. So look, the fact that they have that, on their resume is a real thing to me. They have a comeback win against the Rams where they won, I think, 34-31. And the Rams were still alive, to make the playoffs at that point. So at least if you think, Jimmy G might need to throw for a couple of TDs, 300 plus yards to keep them in, can they win a shootout? Yes, they can. We've got a limited sample size, but I do think it's possible. I already talked about George Kittle's blocking ability. I think he's an absolute weapon on offense. I'll tease ahead that we're going to play George Kittle over because although his stats have been suppressed the last 2 weeks, and if don't just look at the stats and say, oh, Jimmy G's thrown like 100 yards a game, I'm going to bet him under. You mentioned it's because they haven't had to. They've won a lot of games this year by double digits. They do what they need to do. But at the end of the day, Kyle Shanahan is an offensive-minded coach. He's got offensive coordinator background. He is innovative, and they will use Jimmy G to throw when they need to. They leverage off the play action where they set you up for the run, you collapse in, and then it's not a run. It's a play fake, and then they're throwing deep. And they can find guys like George Kittle one-on-one. He's a phenomenal athlete. He's the best player on the 49ers offense. And in a game where they will need points, they will need yards, we expect George Kittle to go over 72.5 yards. He's a modern-day Gronkowski.
Oh, 100% he is, and a funny-ass bloke at that. And the 49ers, I mean, one of the best teams. And I mean, the Chiefs were kind of, renowned for this a couple of years ago. But for pre-snap motion, and I mean, like, they've just been doing it all season long, and they give you so many different looks, so much movement pre-snap, that it makes it extremely tough on the defense, especially this Chiefs defense that has struggled against the run all season. Let's switch paces to...
Well, can I just talk about the Chiefs defense? That was more the Niners offense. One other point we should mention, backup running back Tevin Coleman, shoulder injury. I don't think it makes a big difference because Raheem Mostert's the key bell cow running back who can also... can make plays in the backfield. They got a third running back, Matt Breida, who's pretty good. But, Coleman injury is a slight question mark, but they're still so strong in the running game. Chiefs defense, let's talk about injuries as well. You got Chris Jones, arguably their best defensive player, although Frank Clark has played well, as has Tyrann Mathieu. But Chris Jones, an important pass rusher, has been hampered with a calf, didn't play against Texans, played limited snaps against the Titans 2 weeks ago. 2 weeks to heal, but a calf injury is a funny one. And the thing about the Titans, they just put him on the field in predictable passing downs. So anytime Derrick Henry wasn't on the field, then Chris Jones, they were obviously passing the Titans, and Chris Jones was out there. The problem with the Niners, you don't know when they're passing. They're much more diverse with their formations, and they can catch you napping. So,
all you have to do is look at that 3rd and 8 touchdown, Mostert.
They ran a running back trap play. So Chris Jones' effectiveness and health.
He's going to be fine. He's had this is the first time in months that they've actually had him full practice throughout the week.
So that's a big positive. Now, another weakness for the Chiefs, we've said they're not good at stopping the run, although Frank Clark did do a good job setting the edge against Derrick Henry. Another weakness is the Chiefs linebackers. They got slow linebackers, and even at safety, they lost the starting safety in week 17. I think it was Thornwell, to an ACL. And even Sorensen, who's had some big plays, also doesn't have a good rating when he's in coverage. That's another reason why it goes back to us playing Kittle over, and why I think Jimmy G can and will have some success throwing the ball against the Chiefs.
Yeah, and he might have to, and we'll get to those bets once we get to our best bets, but we think this will be a different sort of game than the 49ers have played in the previous 2 matchups, in the fact that, they probably won't have a huge lead that they can just protect. And even if they do get out to an early lead, they probably know themselves. They've seen what the Chiefs have done the last couple of weeks in coming back from big deficits. So if they're up double digits, 17-7 or something like that, they won't just say, I don't think they can just say, look, we'll put the Q in the rack, because they know what the Chiefs can do. This is going to be an interesting one. The Chiefs O versus the 49ers D. We all know how many weapons this Chiefs offense has. One of the best offenses in the league all season long. And to be honest, like we've said a number of times, we still do think this Chiefs team is coming in a little bit underrated. Like we've said numerous times before, they have been hampered by so many injuries throughout the regular season, to Kelsey, to Hill, to Mahomes, to all a bunch of people, to
Damian Williams,
running backs as well. So this is the first time that this Chiefs team has been fully healthy. This is the first time that Travis Kelsey has had a full week of full practices. He's been limited practices throughout the last 2 months. And with that 2 weeks rest, he had limited practice 2 weeks ago throughout the week, and now he's upgraded to full practice. So it's a great sign for this Chiefs offense. On the flip side, this 49ers defense has been the best or the second best defense in the league the entire season. And I think after what we've seen from the Patriots down the stretch in the last few games of the regular season, and obviously in the playoffs as well, I think you can make a very strong argument that this 49ers defense has been the best defense in the league so far. Great against the pass, so it's going to be a really interesting matchup, because as we know, the Chiefs throw it more than any other team in the league, especially, lately. I know that the game script in the last 2 playoff games has dictated that they should have thrown more, but even when they've been up this season, they throw more than any other team in the league, and this 49ers defense strength is their pass defense. So it's going to be a fascinating game to watch. We'll see if Nick Bosa can get some pressure on Pat Mahomes, because they're going to have to. You can't just let him sit there. But even if you can get pressure on him, it's so tough to get him down. He scrambles like a maniac, as we saw, we've seen throughout the season. And like you mentioned, Jacob, for that 30-yard scramble to score the TD last week. So really fascinating. And I think you're right. In both scenarios, you do give a slight edge to the offensive.
Yeah, and we'll actually probably round this out by talking more about how great I think Pat Mahomes is, but you touched on his scrambling and you touched on injuries. So they've had a few injuries. What's that done? Well, it's suppressed their numbers, that we haven't seen them at full strength and seen what they can do. And they lost a few games this year. They lost back-to-back games where Mahomes had a bad ankle. They lost games where he was out with that dislocated kneecap. They had games without Hill. And Tyreek Hill is this freak athlete, wide receiver, who literally ran a 200 meters in college that would have finished 5th at the Olympics that same year. Like, he's Olympic-level speedster, and it just spreads the field, because you miss a tackle or you miss a coverage, it's not, a big play, it's a touchdown. And they've got other speed to burn with, Hardman, Watkins. They've got, obviously, Kelsey, who's a matchup nightmare, because Kelsey has basically the mobility of a wide receiver, but you can't put a defensive back on him because he's too big. But if you've got a linebacker on him, they're too slow to cover him. So how the 49ers cover Kelsey at all is going to be fascinating.
And it's one of those things where, like, for the 49ers, you kind of know, like, Kittle's the guy. If you're going to double team anyone, it's going to be Kittle. I know that they've got, Debo, they've got Emmanuel Sanders and stuff like that, but they are a level below Kittle. Emmanuel Sanders had 0 catches 2 weeks ago. But for the Chiefs, it's a completely different story. You don't know. Like in the divisional round, Kelsey 2 TDs went off. 3, and then last week, Kelsey had a bit of a down game, but Tyreek Hill went off. Sammy Watkins went off. So you just don't know with this Chiefs team, and that's what I think makes it so difficult to defend. Especially, it's going to be a day game. You're in Miami, that it's a little bit hotter than it normally is. Obviously than KC or something like that. And just these fast dudes, like you said, Tyreek Hill, Hardman, just sprinting around, having to cover them the entire game. It does wear on a defense. And
on top of that, it's Andy Reid, who is an offensive genius, honestly. We see that what he can do. I'm given 2 weeks, again, offensive-minded coach. That he utilizes that speed, those weapons that he has so well. They are a nightmare to stop. On the Niners' defensive side of things, they have a unique defensive formation, they call the nickel, that they often line up in. What's interesting about that, it's a very similar scheme to the Chargers, and Chargers also have Bosa on their defensive line. And so, I've heard people say that the Niners are going to be studying the tape of how the Chiefs attacked the Chargers, and they played twice this year And the Chiefs won both, but both were actually quite close games. Yes. But what I think is that's actually an advantage to the Chiefs, that they have faced up against this type of formation and this style of defense before. Now, it's another level, but it's still, you can't replicate game reps against a similar scheme defense. So I like that. Their line is their strength. They can rust, 100%. Especially since D Ford has come back from injury. It's fierce, and they force really bad QB statistics when he's on the field, because they don't have to rush any more than 4 men, but they can win their matchups and they can get pressure. Now, Pat Mahomes' scrambling ability negates that to an extent, but still, if you're trying to design a defense that could stop Pat Mahomes, having to rush less passes but still get pressure, is what you'd want to design. It does remind me of some recent Super Bowls. I think it was 2015 Denver. This is back when Peyton Manning could still fling it. They were the number 1 offense in the league. They came up against Seattle, and Seattle just out-muscled them, won on the lines of scrimmage and destroyed them. Then a couple of years later, when Manning was a noodle arm, they came up against the MVP of Cam Newton, and it was the Panthers offense that was unstoppable. But the Broncos defensive line, led by Von Miller, they were more physical. They got the win. And this Super Bowl reminds me a bit of those style Super Bowls, which were expected to be close. And it was the defensive and physical team that got the upper hand in those games. One other thing I will say...
I mean, in that one, I get Peyton Manning could not throw the ball at all. But that was... And I get the 49ers defense is right up there. That Denver defense was a historically good defense. And Cam Newton played maybe what I've seen. I understand the defense does some of it, but Cam Newton played maybe his worst game of the season. And obviously, for the Chiefs to win this one, bloody Pat Mahomes cannot have his worst game of the season, that's for sure. I might have lost you, Saka. You there? You might need to refresh your internet. I'm not sure if you're able to reconnect or not. Maybe you can type something in there. Anyway, we'll move on. Maybe I've lost you for the entire thing. Let's get on to the coaching. Like Jacob said, we've got Kyle Shanahan and Andy Reid. They've been there before. They've both had, very, very tough Super Bowl losses. Andy Reid especially, hasn't won a Super Bowl, and everyone still considers him one of the better coaches in the league. Kyle Shanahan obviously was on that Atlanta Falcons team when they blew a 28-3 lead against the Pats. All right, I can call it. All right, we can call this one, and I'll call it part 1. We'll call it part 1. I will try and get Jacob back on the line, and we'll start part 2 in about 2 minutes. See you then, guys.